Now that we've gotten a chance to take a look at the different types of layer modes in Maya, there's yet another type of mode that deals with how rotation and scale interpolate between layers. This next mode, again, is going to control how rotation and scale accumulate in our layer stack. So let's go ahead and first discuss rotation, but before we actually get to that, I'd just like to show you that we're working with a dance animation. I've just added an extra scale to the character coming from the global scale node. So if we were to expand the character node in the outliner, expand character move, here's the character scale. Alright, so going back to our scene, if we were to go to our layers menu, okay, notice under our create layer options, we can set the default way Maya will determine how our rotation is interpolated, either using Euler or Quaternion. And Quaternion, again, helps us to avoid gimbal lock. With this, we're given an extra axis, the W axis, and that can work very well. We'll actually take a look at the change that's going to make in our animation that we're about to add. Okay, and right underneath, we are able to, again, switch to different scale presets. But to actually change this, once we are working with a layer, we'd want to go down to layer accumulation, right underneath layer mode. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to bring back the control objects, and let's go ahead and select the character's right arm control. What we're basically doing is adding some follow through to the character's wrist before he grabs his hat. So with that control object selected, we'll select the rotation attributes and create a new layer from selection. Let's give this layer a name. We'll call this right wrist underscore ori for orientation. Alright, so we're ready to start keyframing. And what we can actually do is use a different type of filter on our timeline. Let's say if we were to right click and choose selected. So we're only seeing the selected layer's keyframes. Okay? We might be able to work a little bit better that way. Alright, so with that layer now made, what we're going to go ahead and do is first set where we like the offset to stop. So on frame 59, rather than using set 0 key, because remember that's going to take our original animation and add its pose to the selected layer. So in this case, notice we're going to get a bad offset. Okay, it's not going to keep our pose preserved. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and undo that and just right click in the channel box with rotation, all of the rotation attributes selected, and choose set key to lock in the pose there on 59. And then on frame 50, we'll do the same. We'll go there and just simply right click on our rotate attributes, key selected. Okay, great. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and work on adding that follow through. We'll go to about frame 54, rotate the wrist down, set a key. Great. And then a few more frames after, on 57, before the character grabs his hat, we'll add some anticipation here, rotating the wrist back, Shift E. Alright, so there we have it. Now let's go ahead and see what type of difference or what type of different result we get as we switch this layer from Euler to Quaternion. So with it selected, we'll go back to layers, go to layer accumulation, and choose Quaternion. Alright, notice the wrist offset looks a little bit better actually using Quaternion rotation. Great, so I might want to actually go ahead and leave that alone. I'll go ahead and just leave it set to Quaternion, because with Euler we got a little bit of a popping issue with the wrist as the character lifts his arm up. Alright, great. So here's an excellent example of where Quaternion would work out better for us, as we can clearly see. Now, what's nice is that if you're familiar with animating with Quaternion rotation, you know that you're not able to offset your keys because it's a different way of interpreting rotation. But what's nice is that Maya has actually made it possible for us to get the best of both worlds. So with this object selected, if we were to go to Window, Animation Editors, and see the Graph Editor, we'll focus on our rotate attributes. And just to show you this, I'll select one of the rotate keys. Let's say this key here on 57. Notice if we were to go to one of our transform tools, let's say the move tool, so we can move this key, and we just offset it. Notice even though this layer is set to quaternion rotation, we're still able to offset the key from the others. And this gives us a whole world of extra control. So I find this to be a very, very handy tool. Great, so that's how we can work with our accumulation modes. If you notice a lot of flipping happening in your controls as you animate their rotation, try switching that to quaternion. And again, you're still able to control the offset of your keys for some extra subtleties and follow through. So I would recommend experimenting with that to see if that's going to work out to be better for your situation. Alright, so next, let's go ahead and talk about scale. Let's go ahead and select the character scale layer. Okay. Now, by default, we have our accumulation mode set to multiply, which is basically going to multiply our values by layer. Okay, and this is what we're getting. But with additive, okay, it's as simple as taking our values and then adding them one on top of another. So to show you this, if we were to go back to layers with character scale selected, we were to go to layer accumulation. Let's see what happens as we switch our accumulation to additive. Now you'll see our character becomes ginormous because rather than multiplying our values, again, we're adding them. Okay, so in this case, I'd probably want to leave this set to multiply. Okay, so we can basically use scale how it is intended to be used, or at least in this animation. So we can basically keep our character roughly at the size we'd like him to be at. But if there's ever a time where you'd like to drastically increase your character's size as you're animating his scale, you can go ahead and switch that to additive. And for the lesson's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just switch that back to additive, just so you can see the difference there. Alright, so in this lesson, we saw yet another mode, okay, that deals with rotation and scale, how we can control their accumulation.